I think that the clue, or the main clue to where the Monastery of Deer is in the book.
So the Book of Deer is a small prayer book that would have been portable. It would have been a pocket gospel, and in it's got Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, the Gospels, illustrated, and interestingly for us, in the sides and bottom of the pages it's got some of the earliest Gaelic that we have in Britain, and in it talks about the foundation of a monastery in the Old Deer area. So it mentions places like Old Deer, Biffy, Aden, and so we know that there was a monastery in the area of Old Deer from around the 10th century.
But it would have been very rare within the illuminated manuscripts to mention the place where the manuscript was written, and that was not a common thing. So it's not uncommon to find out there's no mention of Old Deer. Although Aden, and there are other places all round about which seem to give importance to the fact that the Book of Deer was written locally, local place names, Achmachar, Skillimarno, those are what they're called today, but they're in Gaelic within the Book of Deer. Aden is in the Book of Deer. So you have all these places within the Book of Deer. When you add all these place names together, these are not on the original Latin of the Book of Deer. These are marginalia, these place names I have mentioned, and it's land grants that were probably, the book was quite rare, and any book was quite rare in those days. So if they had a book, they would utilise it to the best of their ability, and the Book of Deer was also used during the 12th century for land grants and dealings with local landowners who were donating land to the monks of Deer. So this would all be accounted on, and as I say, the book was already written, but down the sides, marginalia, were all these land grants. So they were filling every bit of space because paper was so precious. So that is another reason for us to think that the Book of Deer was written locally in a monastery locally. There are also legends that the Monastery of Deer could be seen, or the Abbey of Deer could be seen from the monastery. So, and this is written down in various places. They think, again documented, that the monastery was a quarter of a mile from the abbey downriver of the Ugi, and the opposite bank of the river.
So over the last 10 years, archaeologists have been looking for the monastery, and we've done various things such as geophysical survey, walking around the areas, looking to see if we can find any lumps and bumps in the field. And we've done quite a lot of different excavations. So for example, in Old Deer, we spent 3 or 4 seasons looking in Old Deer in the church there, which is the site that many people thought that the monastery had been located. So in Old Deer there's a bend in the river and a medieval church, and we've looked at the medieval church to see if it's possible that it's early medieval in date, which it isn't. And we've also dug in the graveyard and around about the church, and found really nothing early medieval. Lots of things that date to the 12th, 13th century and later. So last year we decided to concentrate on the area around Deer Abbey, and we had a geophysical survey carried out of the whole field, including the neighbouring properties, which would have been the land around Deer Abbey.
St Columba is mentioned in the Book of Deer as arriving with one of his disciples, St Drosten, on the shores of Aberdour in the northeast, and he travelled to Old Deer. Well, he went to Aberdour first, and then he travelled to Old Deer, ostensibly to Christianise the Picts. That was his mission. These, they would call them saints now, but missionaries come out from Ireland, and they were sent out into Scotland. They would come right up the Caledonian Canal, right down the east coast, and they would settle. And then they would try and convert the local populace. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the way that they did this, they would pick an item that would have some sort of religious importance. A local historian, 20th century, the late 20th century historian, Jim Buchan, who thinks the monastery was in the area of the Addin Mansion House, and we did some geophys last year in the areas round about the Mansion House, and we found some anomalies, and that is a dig that we are contemplating for May 2019. So there are other areas to explore. There is a St Drosten's Well in Stewartfield, for example. There might be an association there, but at the moment, and until such times as hopefully it can be confirmed that what we have found within Deer Abbey site is the monastery, we will continue to explore other areas. Yeah.
I mean, the Book of Deer project's always been really keen on education, so getting all the children involved from lots of local schools. We've had 10 years of taking the kids who are in feeder schools to Mintlaw Academy, and so several of the classes have been more than once, and if you're walking around the area they say, oh, you're the archaeology wifey, because they've been on, you know, on several digs, and so they understand a bit about archaeology and a bit about local history. And of course they love the digging. They really like coming and digging and finding things. And we always take them on real sites, you know, these are not made up sites, this is actual real archaeology. And so they appreciate that, you know, they really enjoy coming out, spending a morning or afternoon with us, and you know, just a bit of fresh air and, you know, just enjoying themselves.
The giantess who brewed their heady ale was the daughter of Cubby Roo, the legendary giant of Wyre. Never had her heather ale been so strong.
And the archaeology students we take obviously as part of their training, so they're archaeology students who need to do some digging and some supervising and drawing and all the different aspects of archaeology. So we'll take them on the dig and, you know, just obviously explain all that to them and get them to take part in different activities. Also supervising other people. We have a lot of volunteers. So this year we had 80 people involved just in the dig, not including the school kids. But so those 80 people, a lot of them hadn't dug before, and so the archaeology students will also learn how to teach people. So they'll teach volunteers how to dig and how to do the different sorts of, you know, activities that we do on a dig. And so last year we did an excavation and found several structures in one trench, and also a hearth in another trench with a very sort of flimsy fence-like structure round about it. And we had that hearth dated to around 1150 to 1250. So that would be the late monastery period and the early abbey period. And so we couldn't say definitely that that was to do with the earlier monastery or the abbey, which was founded in 1219. And the other trench, the features were so deep that we weren't able to get to everything that we wanted to last year. So this year we went back, and to the hearth trench we excavated another trench next to it to look and see if there was further information that we could get from that trench. And we found a path in that trench which appeared to be running next to a watercourse, so either a natural stream or a man-made stream. And we didn't get a chance to excavate into it, but we've sent off a sample for dating for the path to see whether it's very early or not. But also other small trenches that we excavated, we found stake holes all over and post holes all over the area, and we weren't able to completely interpret them just from the dig this year. And so we would like to go back and do more in that area to see if we can open up more of this early medieval building, which may, be one of the monastery buildings. I mean, we found this flat stone which had scratches on it from what had been a board game, and we did a little research and found that it was a game, like a Viking or Norse game called Nefertafel.
So Naval is a game that belongs to the Tafel family of board games that are very possibly derived from an earlier Roman game whose name I cannot say, so don't make me. It's a game that focuses on outnumbered defenders protecting a king who is trying to escape to a corner, which are usually the forts. It's interesting in that as a game it's unfair on one side, whereas most games we play nowadays are usually fair, and it stresses running away from a fight in societies that are highly martial and where running away goes against your ideas of honour and how you're meant to conduct a fight. So it's rather interesting in that respect. You have the defenders in the centre of the board with the king on his throne or hall, surrounded by ambushers or attackers. And the objective of the game for the defenders, who are outnumbered, is to get their king out of the centre and into one of the protective corner forts, at which point they win. If you're an attacker, you have to surround the king to win the game. And this is obviously about the importance of kings and their role in society and warfare in particular, that they are the important figure and everyone else is on their own completely insignificant in the game. Most of these games died out sometime around the 12th centuries when chess replaced Naval as the popular game of choice in both the upper class and lower classes in Europe. The game appears to have been the popular game of the time, so everyone from the peasantry to the kings appears to have played it. There's a reference to King Aethelred of England playing it. There's pagan Vikings bringing it over, so they're playing it. There are board games found in Christian sites, so the Christian monks were playing with it, and ordinary peasants also appear to have played this game. So pretty much everyone was playing it during its era of popularity.
And of course these finds, individually are really exciting, and the team really, got a lot out of that, because we were able to research the game, find out what date it was, and actually play the game, of course, with the students and the visitors. But then later, of course, it got cut down and made into a circle and used for a pot lid. So it was, it would have been used maybe in the abbey to cover up a jug or a pot to stop the contents evaporating, or to keep the contents inside.
Some of the pottery that we've found is possibly very significant because it belongs to a period where the pottery is less defined in Scotland and we're less sure of what it is.
We found some handmade pottery, which is very unusual. It's not been known in Aberdeenshire before to find handmade medieval pottery. And we had a piece of that dated last year to the late 1200s and early 1300s. And it may have been used for some industrial process. Our pottery specialist, Derek Hall, says that he's seen it before when it's been used in things like fish processing, and so it's possible that we have an industrial process where this pottery is being used. But we also have a lot of other medieval pottery, so from like 12 and 1300s, and we have pottery made locally and also in places like Yorkshire and on the continent, and again our specialist is looking at that at the moment. But we've got things like, I saw a piece of a Yorkshire jug which has got a face on it, and different bits of pottery that would have been on the table in the abbey in the 12 and 1300s. We've also found things like other industrial remains like slag and lots of charcoal. So they were doing lots of heating of hearths and metalworking, and the slag is the waste from that. So They would have been making, obviously, working metal for all sorts of different things that they use, like knives. I mean, we've certainly had interest from America, and it's been in a magazine in America, and we would expect to have a bit more from America. Certainly in Europe, you know, people are interested in these early monastic sites, and so you know, we've had interest from archaeologists in, you know, in various areas around the world, really. And if we have found it, obviously it's incredibly exciting, and you know, there'll be a lot of interest in it.
There might be a lot more clues to where the monastery is, or just even more clues within the text to give us an idea about. I mean, the book tells a lot about society in early medieval times. And that is another one-off for the Book of Deer. It is the oldest book that gives an insight into Celtic society in northeast Scotland, if not the whole of Scotland at that time. There is no other document that does this. So I mean, so these are all little things that are in the book that really warrant more study.
Problem is, we don't really know what a monastery of that time looked like, so we can't definitively say that what we have is or isn't a monastery. But because the Cistercians who moved in later were not allowed to accept land that had been worked on or cleared, it is highly unlikely that they would move on to land that was already occupied by the monastery, because that would have counted as cleared land. So what we've found probably isn't the monastery, though we have so little of it. I don't know if we could say either way anyway.
Before this dig, we were not sure that the monastery was there. It's a very good location, there's a river nearby, they would have had everything the monastery would have needed, but the dating of this to the late 7th, early 8th century makes it much more likely that we're in the area of the monastery.
I definitely think it's in the vicinity of Old Deer, and obviously with all the things that we have found quite recently, and with our Nefertafel, which is definitely I think pre-Cistercian, and also with the carbon dating, I think yes, but as I say, I'm not giving up other areas within, and if we can still search within a remit for you know, other areas that we think likely that the monastery site might be. But I really hope within hope that we get to go back into the abbey and prove once and for all that that is the monastic site. That would be my goal, yeah. There is another project ongoing, and that is Friends of Arden, and we have got funding for the next 5 years. So we are doing archaeology in Arden Park, and we will continue to look for the monastery, and hopefully we might find something within Arden Park. On the Book of Deer project, we are trying so hard. We're massive publicity machine going on at the moment, and it just is about maintaining that momentum and just trying to get in contact with people who can help us with funding, and who it's letting people know how important the Book of Deer is, and you know, finding the site where the Book of Deer was written is just it's on a par. You know, that's what I think. So yes, it is so important we do it. Funding, we're just going to have to keep on searching for funding, but we're all on there's a lot of people who are in the same boat. We're all trying to chase the same very small pot. We just need to justify, and I think some of the publicity that we're doing at the moment more than justifies the funding, you know, prospective funding, but but it's just getting in contact with the right people and trying to, you know, put our thoughts across and try and convince them, and then that would be the thing.